Welcome to episode 12 of Followers of the Cross. This is your host, Jason Reynolds. After this episode, I will start bringing you interviews from the International Christian Retail Show in Cincinnati, featuring a number of authors of various Christian books. Today's episode is a little bit longer than normal because we have so much to pack in. Today, I'm speaking to my friend, Robert Vera, author of A Warrior's Faith. His book has sold extremely well and has won awards since being released last year by Nelson Books. The book is about the late Ryan Jobe, a Navy SEAL who was terribly wounded while serving in Iraq with Chris Kyle. Ryan was blinded, but did not let that stop him from doing a number of things like climbing Mount Rainier with Robert. Robert has long worked to help wounded veterans like Ryan. Now he is working with the SPARTA Project to help veterans and first responders who suffer with PTSD. Robert has just signed a deal with Baker Books for a new book on another Navy SEAL, and he will tell you a little bit about that hero later. Now to the program. So, welcome, Robert. Thanks for joining us today for the podcast.
Thank you. It's really great to be here. I appreciate you having me today.
My friend Robert is an author, and he has worked with wounded veterans in various ways, and he has told me recently that he's working on a new project as well with veterans. Robert, can you tell me a little bit about Project Sparta and what that involves, and then we'll get a little bit into the book about Ryan Jobe.
Yeah, thanks very much. So the Sparta Project is, we are now the premier program to treat warfighters and veterans and first responders who are experiencing symptoms of post-traumatic stress. I call it post-traumatic stress because I'm not sure the definition of post-traumatic stress disorder actually applies to a lot of the warfighters that I know. But the SPARTA Project's really, its function is to treat what I believe is the most sort of dangerous or part of trauma, the trauma wound, which is the spiritual and moral wounds that accompany perhaps the physical and psychological wounds of war and violence. So the SPARTA Project, we have a team of clinical practitioners headed by chaplains and others, clinical professionals, that really first they explain what happens to the brain and the autonomic nervous system under continuous stress. And frankly, what happens is that there's some changes to the brain, specifically the frontal lobe area and other parts of the brain that are completely normal and very predictable, which cause certain symptoms that, which are again are completely normal and predictable. So first we explain the sort of anatomy, physiology of, the brain on war, if you will, and then we get into unpacking sort of the spiritual and moral wounds associated with war. There's the shame and guilt, which is very predictable, that comes with that experience. Unpacking them, and lastly, we ask our participants to really use this experience, the unpacking of it, to leverage it in a way to become greater, to think and act greater than their past, and because if you think and act greater than your past, then you won't become a victim of it, and to think and act greater than their environment, so that they can act, so that the environment doesn't cause the inside world to act like the outside world, not letting the outside world control the inside of them. And then lastly, we ask them to think and act greater than the way that they feel. And in doing so, they're able to elevate themselves, beyond the trauma, beyond the pain, to a place where, hopefully in most cases, in many cases, they're much better off than they were prior to the service or their experience. And we work with not only warfighters and veterans, but we have a contract with the Los Angeles Police Department where they send their law enforcement officers who are experiencing behavioral issues associated with trauma, and many other organizations. So I'm really, really proud to be part of it. We have locations in Minnesota, California, and here in my home state of Arizona. We also just signed an agreement, and we're to be our second trip to Australia to treat special forces commandos in Australia who, have fought in for many, many years now alongside us in Afghanistan, and they're deployed in other places across the globe, such as East Timor and the like. So, yeah, really proud to be able to bring some transformation and relief to our veterans and warfighters across the globe. So, yeah, thanks for mentioning that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'm looking, I believe this is the website for the project, the letter U, transform.org.
Yeah, correct. The URL is utransform.org, and you can find more information about who we serve, how we do it, our staff, board, and the like there. And so, yeah, I can find more information about what we do at utransform.org.
The letter U. So it looks like
I'm the executive director of the program. If you look under staff, you'll find me as executive director, and you'll see that we have a pretty good team there of clinicians as well as board members and clinical staff.
Yeah. I'm looking at the locations that you mentioned. So these are set up in a camp or a retreat environment.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that I think for us, it's really important to have I'll call it a safe environment, but an environment that sort of we have control over, so that there's not a lot of public access. That so you can sort of you feel secure, like okay, this is us. We're here alone. We can talk about these things. So yeah, and so we use 3 facilities. One is the Franciscan Renewal Center, which is a great retreat center here in Scottsdale, Arizona. Camp Courage up in Minnesota, and Camp Cass in Malibu, overlooking the ocean in Malibu. So really great place. Look, I mean, I know this may sound strange, but I think it's really fun to be able to go and sort of examine the wreckage in a safe environment, and people that really love and sort of want the best for you. And that, I think that when we talk about, we've heard, and you and I were talking a little bit before we started about, the situation in the veteran community about suicide. And, over the years, I've really come to the conclusion that, I've really distilled it down to its lowest common denominator, is that suicide is a condition of hopelessness. And really, if you think about it, there's no pill that you can take to cure it. Really, hopelessness is cured, or at least ameliorated, by the right relationships in your life, coupled with the right information and the right perspective. And so having a facility with, that's secure, with practitioners who are experienced in care, those are the right relationships.
So it sounds like the program treats them like individuals who have worth, and they're not just a number that shows up at a sterile clinic where people don't really give them much individual attention, or they just sit around forever waiting for a doctor.
Of course. I think that they're, and I think that, look, most veterans, or most people, civilians and veterans, are accustomed to hearing about the Veterans Administration. So at this point, I probably need to sort of, in my own way, because I don't think it serves our veterans well for me to disparage the Veterans Administration, but to let them off the hook. And here's how. I don't think that the VA has ever been, or ever said, that they are capable of treating the complexity associated with trauma or post-traumatic stress, meaning I think that they can do some of it, and perhaps 50% of it, let's say the physical and psychological wounds. But if you look at the trauma associated with or the injury associated with trauma, all trauma, we see that there's perhaps a physical component to it. There's definitely a spiritual component to it that's associated with loss, right? There's a moral component to it. And the moral injury is when the institution, in effect, perhaps lies to you or makes you do something that you feel is wrong. So there's an institutional injury, an institutional component to it, which causes a moral injury. And then you have, which the spiritual and moral wound may create. And because of the spiritual and moral wound, it may beget a psychological wound, right? You can have a psychosis because of these things, right? So, or something like that. But I don't think that the Veterans Administration has ever been capable of effectively treating the spiritual and moral wounds associated with trauma. So in that regard, I need to let them off the hook. But here's where I think that I need to make this point is that, I think the Veterans Administration would prefer us focus on long lines. In my home state here of Arizona, certainly we've heard stories of the Phoenix VA where people have, died because of long lines. There's been all sorts of controversy associated with the Phoenix VA. And I think the long lines really hide a really deadly statistic in that almost all of the 22 a day that we're hearing about by the VA's own count and by their own statistics, almost all of them. In fact, I think I'll say almost all of them. Let's say the vast majority of them, over 50%, let's say. And I don't have the exact number, but almost all of them. And I believe the number's well over 50%, more like 90%, have actually been treated at the Veterans Administration. Now, the problem is with that is that the Veterans Administration doesn't want you to know it's about efficacy, meaning their ability to actually treat this wound effectively, versus we don't have access, right? So access is much more palatable, I think, for lawmakers to say, well, we got to put more money into this. Well, here's the problem. We went from 18 a day to 22 suicides a day. And all the government did is dump billions, literally billions of dollars more into the same type of treatment programs. So not to be sort of glib about it, right? But, doing the same things over and over again and expecting a different result, no pun intended, right? That is the definition of insanity. Right. So the VA is frankly not capable, by their own evidence, by their own statistics, by the own public sort of knowledge about this, the Veterans Administration is not able to effectively treat the trauma associated with war, at least not the specific component of spiritual and moral wounds that beget things like guilt and shame and the like. They're just not able to do that. And what we see now is they create a condition, they in fact help to create a condition of hopelessness amongst the veterans community. And our mission is to create an epidemic of hope, to replace that epidemic of suicide. So that's what our work is in the SPARTA Project. And, we're really anxious to grow it and to make it scalable and to deliver it to any warfighter, veteran, or first responder who needs this type or is interested in this type of treatment program as a means to personal growth, as a means to overcoming the issues associated with trauma and going beyond where they feel as though, using this trauma to go beyond where they feel as though that they are now to do something great with their lives and inspire others to be not just give permission for their colleagues and warfighters and friends to go, but also give them permission to say, hey, you should go and investigate this type or this program, the SPARTA Project.
Okay. It sounds like a great program. I look forward to hearing more about it as it continues to grow and make changes, make differences in the lives of the veterans. And that brings me to another veteran, Ryan Job, who you had written about a couple of years ago, I guess it was, with A Warrior's Faith. For people who may not be quite as familiar with Ryan, can you give a short bio on who this man was, who this hero was, and how he inspired people?
Yeah, inspired me too. Ryan Job was a great friend. So those listeners who have seen the movie American Sniper and or read the book American Sniper, you may have recall a Navy SEAL referred to as Biggles. Biggles served alongside Chris Kyle in SEAL Team 3. Biggles was his nickname. His real name was Ryan Job. Ryan Job was a Navy SEAL. He was assigned to SEAL Team 3 and deployed to Ramadi, Iraq in the early spring of 2006. He was operating with SEAL Team 3 in August in the streets of Ramadi. Him and Chris Kyle were, in August 2nd, 2006, were on a rooftop in south central Ramadi, Iraq, and they were doing overwatch for their SEAL teams working the streets below.